eating healthy and losing weight seems downright impossible for many people. Despite their best intentions, they repeatedly find themselves eating large amounts of unhealthy foods, despite knowing that it is causing them harm. The truth is, the effects of certain foods on the brain can lead to downright addiction. Food addiction is a very serious problem and one of the main reasons some people just can't control themselves around certain foods, no matter how hard they try. What is food addiction? Food addiction, simply put, is being addicted to junk food in the same way drug addicts are addicted to drugs. It involves the same areas in the brain, the same neurotransmitters, and many of the symptoms are identical. Food addiction is a relatively new, and controversial, term, and there are no good statistics available on how common it is. This is very similar to several other eating disorders, including binge eating disorder, bulimia, compulsive overeating, and having an unhealthy relationship with food. Food is essential to human survival and is an important aspect of our wellness, in addition to a means of pleasure and enjoyment. Food not only provides needed sustenance, it also adds a gratification factor through various tastes, smells, textures, etc. However, for many individuals, food can become as addictive as drugs are to a substance abuser. Processed junk foods have a powerful effect on the reward centers in the brain, involving brain neurotransmitters like dopamine. The foods that seem to be the most problematic include typical junk foods, as well as foods that contain either sugar or wheat, or both. Food addiction is not about a lack of willpower or anything like that. It is caused by the intense dopamine signal hijacking the biochemistry of the brain. There are many studies that support the fact that food addiction is a real problem. For men and women suffering from a food addiction, highly palatable foods, which are often rich in fat, sugar, and/or salt, trigger chemical reactions in the brain that induce feelings of pleasure and satisfaction. This reaction has been explained as comparable to an addict's response to their substance of choice, as it activates the same brain reward center. Food addicts become dependent upon the good feelings that are obtained from consuming certain foods, which often perpetuates a continued need to eat, even when not hungry. These behaviors generate a vicious cycle. As the food addict continues to gorge upon foods that induce pleasurable feelings, they often overindulge and eat beyond what is required for satiety and normal nutrition. This can lead to several physical, emotional, and social consequences, such as digestive issues, heart disease, obesity, low self-esteem, depression, and isolation. A food addict will often re-engage in these destructive behaviors, even amidst undesired consequences, due to the need for induced feelings of pleasure. Because of the ferocious cycle of food addiction and the detrimental consequences associated with this behavior, it is crucial that professional help is sought. If you or a loved one has been struggling with an addiction to food, consider the possibilities of a life free of this burden. You can find peace from a food addiction by seeking the appropriate care and help you need. Causes of food addiction. Food addiction is likely the culmination of several factors that interplay in the overall cause of this disorder. A man or woman may develop an addiction as a result of biological, psychological, or social reasons. Biological causes that may influence the progression of a food addiction might include hormonal imbalances, abnormalities in various brain structures, side effects from the use of certain medications, or having family members with this type of addiction issues. A food addiction might also be the result of psychological factors. Factors included in this category might include emotional or sexual abuse, being a victim or survivor of a traumatic event, having an inability to healthily cope with negative situations, chronic low self-esteem, or experiencing grief or loss. Psychological factors such as these can influence an individual to use food as a coping mechanism to relieve the painful emotions that may have resulted. Lastly, There are social implications that may be involved with food addiction, including factors such as disturbances in family function, pressure from peers or society, social isolation, child abuse, lack of social support, and stressful life events. Food addiction can also be associated with other co-occurring disorders, such as eating disorders or substance abuse. Because food addiction is a complex mental health issue that can have serious complications if left untreated, it is highly recommended that professional help be sought to effectively heal from this disorder. There is no blood test available to diagnose food addiction. Just like with other addictions, it is based on behavioral symptoms. You frequently get cravings for certain foods, despite feeling full and having just finished a nutritious meal. When you give in and start eating a food you were craving, you often find yourself eating much more than you intended. Difficulty function in a career or job due to decreased efficiency. Spending significant amount of money on buying certain foods for binging purposes. Decreased energy, chronic fatigue. Difficulty concentrating. Sleep disorders, such as insomnia or oversleeping. Restlessness. Irritability. Headaches. Digestive disorders. Suicidal ideations. If you or your loved one has been experiencing any of these above symptoms as a result of food addiction, seek out professional help immediately to work through these pertinent issues. Effects of food addiction. If you or your loved one had been struggling with a food addiction, you may understand the implications this may have on the various aspects of your life. If a food addiction is left ignored or untreated, it can rapidly begin consuming your life, creating damaging and chronic symptoms. Understanding how food addiction may affect the different aspects of your life may encourage you to get the help you need and deserve. The following are some of the effects of food addiction. Physical effects. Food addiction can result in many negative physical consequences on the body as an excess of food is consumed. These are some physical effects that may be experienced. Heart disease. Diabetes. Digestive problems. Malnutrition. Obesity. Chronic fatigue. Chronic pain. Sleep disorders. Reduced sex drive. Headaches. Lethargy. Arthritis. Stroke. Kidney, liver disease. Osteoporosis. Psychological effects. Food addiction can be debilitating to mental health, especially if there is a lack of support or inadequate help. Some of the psychological effects that may be experienced include low self-esteem, depression, panic attacks, increased feelings of anxiety, feeling sad, hopeless, or in despair, increased irritability, especially if access to desired food is restricted, emotional detachment or numbness, suicidal ideation, social effects. Finally, food addiction can have an impact on your social life and relationships. Social effects of food addiction include decreased performance at work or school, isolation from loved ones, division within family units, lack of enjoyment in hobbies or activities once enjoyed, avoidance of social events or functions, risk of jeopardizing finances or career. Food addiction can cause physical harm. It can lead to serious diseases like obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, arthritis and depression, to name a few. But you have even bigger reasons to quit than some unfamiliar disease in your distant future. Food addiction is also ruining your life today. It breaks your self-esteem, makes you unhappy with your body and can make your life a living hell. The seriousness of being a food addict cannot be overstated. This is a problem that ruins lives and kills people. Literally. Administration of a drug to an addict will cause re-establishment of chemical dependence upon the addictive substance. A former smoker who has a puff of a cigarette will become addicted again instantly. An alcoholic who has a sip of beer will relapse, with all the horrible consequences that follow. There is no way of getting around it. This is simply how addiction works. Food addiction is no different. One bite of cake, one sip of Coke, one cheat, that's all it takes. Of course, we all need to eat something. Otherwise we'll die of starvation. But no one needs to eat sugar, refined wheat flour or any of the modern junk foods that people tend to lose control over. Most food addicts will never be able to eat junk food like regular people again. That's the cold, hard truth. But if they manage to avoid the trigger foods, then they should be able to eat healthy and lose weight without problems. The truth is, complete abstinence is the only thing that reliably works against addiction. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you will recover. Although the everything in moderation message may work for some people, this advice is a complete disaster for food addicts. When it comes to addiction, moderation fails. Every time. This is the simple, but not easy, solution to addiction. Avoiding the addictive substance at all times. Completely avoiding junk foods may seem impossible. These foods are everywhere and are a major part of our culture. But once you've made the decision to never eat them again, avoiding them actually becomes easier. When you've made a firm decision to avoid them completely, then there's no need for you to justify anything in your head and the cravings may not even show up. Many people who have done this don't even get cravings anymore, not after they've made a profound decision to simply avoid this stuff permanently. If you're still in doubt and are unsure if this is worth the sacrifice, then write down a list of pros and cons. Pros might include, I'll lose weight, I'll live longer, I'll have more energy and feel better every day, etc. Cons might include, I won't be able to eat ice cream with my family, no cookies on Christmas, I might have to explain my food choices. Most of these social dilemmas can be solved easily. Write everything down, no matter how peculiar or vain. Then put your two lists side by side and ask yourself, is it worth it? If the answer is a resounding yes, then you can rest assured that you are doing the right thing. There are a few things you can do to prepare yourself and make the transition as easy as possible. Trigger foods. Write down a list of the foods you tend to crave or binge on. These are the trigger foods you need to avoid completely. Fast food places. Write down a list of fast food places that serve healthy foods. This is important and can prevent a relapse when you find yourself hungry and not in the mood to cook. What to eat. Think about what foods you're going to eat. Preferably healthy foods that you like and are already eating regularly. Pros and cons. Consider making several copies of your pros and cons list. Keep a copy in your kitchen, glove compartment and purse, wallet. Sometimes you will need a reminder about why you're doing this. It's important to not go on a diet. Put weight loss on hold for at least 3 months. Overcoming food addiction is hard enough as it is. By adding hunger and additional restrictions to the mix, you will just make things even harder and set yourself up for failure. Now set a date. Sometime in the near future, maybe this weekend or next week. From this day and onward, you will never touch the addictive foods again. Not a single bite ever. Period. If you end up relapsing and losing control over your consumption again, then you're not alone. Relapses are the rule when it comes to addiction, not the exception. Most people have a history of several failed attempts before they manage to succeed in the long run. If you relapse often, then there really is no point in trying to do it on your own again. If you've failed 100 times, then the chances of you succeeding when you try it for the 101st time are almost non-existent. Luckily, help is not far off. There are health professionals and support groups that can help you overcome this serious problem. You can seek professional help. for example from a psychologist or psychiatrist. Try to find someone who has actual experience in dealing with food addiction. But there are several free options available as well, including 12-step programs like Overeaters Anonymous, Grace Eaters Anonymous, GSA, Food Addicts Anonymous, FAA, and Food Addicts in Recovery Anonymous, FA. Just go to their websites, find a meeting. They also have online Skype meetings, and go to it. Food addiction treatment. If you or a loved one has found yourself stuck in the vicious cycle of food addiction, you have likely experienced a roller coaster of emotions, including despair, frustration, and hopelessness. Living with food addiction may be preventing you from enjoying a life you once lived, though the possibility for healing always exists. By seeking the appropriate help and care you need, you can find the resources to address your food addiction in an effective manner. Thankfully, there are specialized food addiction treatment centers that can help you approach this disorder in a holistic and comprehensive manner. Food addiction treatment centers offer multi-specialty treatment that will focus on and address medical issues and nutritional concerns while integrating psychotherapy. There are also a myriad of support groups that you can become involved with, such as Food Addicts Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, and Food Addicts in Recovery Anonymous. These groups are 12-step-based programs that effectively address food addiction on the physical, emotional, and spiritual aspects, offering much-needed support to individuals seeking to heal from their addiction to food. Attempting to deal with your food addiction alone can possibly further draw you into fear or isolation. Having guidance, help and support from an eating disorder center that treats food addiction, specialist, or support group can provide you or your loved one with the tools and resources you need to recover and heal from a food addiction.